Okay, well, we'll get this kicked off then. Good afternoon, Pat. I'm
Good
Sam,
afternoon.
and welcome to episode one of Dozo Sumo. We'll just, I guess, kick it off, go right into who we are. Two good friends, best friends. Been friends for probably like about 30 years, coming up on 30 years since we were first grade in kindergarten. Um, just military brats. Grew up moving around, lived in same places multiple times. So just been friends for a really long time. And then how we got into sumo, I have Pat to thank for that, and I'll let you kind of how you got into it first.
Yeah, I got into sumo. Well, really was so like for me personally, like I've never really been a sports guy. Never really followed any sport. Never really had an interest in pretty much any sport. Um, but I've always had interest in Japan. I've been now three times. I just like kind of love all things Japanese. And the first time that I went to Japan, I went to watch sumo, just kind of more as a like, oh, when you go to Japan, it's a thing to do, kind of like as a tourist. Um, but I ended up just really loving it and thought it was fascinating and wanted to learn more about it. So when I came back, I really started talking more with Sam about it, and we kind of started getting into it together and following it together. That's definitely like the beginning of my journey with it, and kind of like how I got Sam involved into it too.
Yeah, I didn't really know anything about it. And then we went in May 2019,
Yeah.
unknowingly during a Basho, and we went out. And at night, when we would come back to the hotel, we would have a nightcap, usually a 7-Eleven brew, and another tasty treat that we would buy at 7-Eleven, and we would watch the recap that night. So usually after a few drinks in us and just enjoying watching big guys fighting, pushing each other out. And then from there, started watching it. I was much more casual about it at first, and then we started talking about it more and more. We talked about planning another trip to Japan, and then I think during COVID, I mean, that's really when I got in much more involved, much more interested in it. I really enjoy the sport. For me, I grew up playing sports. I could watch just about any sport, but I mean, what I really enjoy about sumo is that it's just kind of just raw. Get the other fighter out of the ring or on the ground. So it's just no weight classes, no nothing like that. Doesn't matter how old, what like I said, what no weight class, what size. It's just who's better and can win um, by any means necessary, really, without strikes or punches or anything like that. It's just throws, pushes, pulls like that. So we,
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool too. Just real quick, I think it's interesting because it's like I think my first time when I saw it in Japan, I was with my wife, and we like she's also she's also not into sports. We bond over our lack of interest in sports, um, but we I think it's like it's such an easy sport to kind of get into visually because it's extremely deep, obviously, in terms of all the moves and all the techniques and all the styles and everything. But it's very easy to just look at and understand, like on a base level. Like it's easy to kind of like exactly what you just said. Like if you push someone out or you throw them to the ground. Like at the end of the day, like that's really all it is. And I think that's like I think I kind of love the onionness of it. Like there's these layers to it. Like it seems kind of simple on the surface, but then the more you start like learning about it and reading about it, like obviously it's like hundreds and hundreds of years of tradition. And I think like that's kind of in the end what drew it to me more than like I said have never really been into a sport. I think it's kind of because of that. Like I've just never really had the interest in the sport, but I found interest in kind of like the history and like the like the depth of that's like available for the sport.
yeah, the traditions and customs that are still celebrated and honored during bashos and fights are really fun to see. From when they all march out together to the Yokozuna doing his war dance before it all starts to throwing salt. Um, a lot of the Shinto traditions that they still to this day, centuries later, still follow. And so it's kind of a good segue into what do we hope to accomplish with this podcast besides just talking about sumo news, whether it's a Basho preview during the Basho, after it, or just the goings on. We also wanted to talk more about history and the culture of sumo, what's involved really when you're watching TV. Why does the ref or the Gyoji wear what he wears? Why do the sumo, what sumo wrestlers with, what's special, historic about the top knots? Really, all a lot of little bits. What are the special prizes that wrestlers win? So we want to, focus quite a bit more on that than maybe other podcasts may touch on. Other than that, as we're moving, maybe top fights, top fighters that we want to look out for. Um, while we're going, but also before when we were getting into sumo, one things we did was we did our own sumo fantasy of we
Mm.
basically doing a sumo draft each Banzuke, and then
I want to point out that was also my idea, and I
mhm,
never done a fantasy and know nothing about fantasy.
yeah, so it was a great time, and then it was a good lead up to when we went to Japan earlier this year. Um, and cycled from Hiroshima to Tokyo, finishing and in Tokyo during the Basho and went to day 14. So got to watch Teruno Fuji won it that day, correct? Yeah, he
Yeah,
won
that
it the
was the
day
day
we
that
were there.
he technically won, even though there was still one more day left in the
Yeah,
tournament. But at that point, he had won.
so it was fun. That's where I got my going the wrong way. Hoshoyu
There
towel
it
that
is.
you see there. Yeah, so that's kind of really what we wanted. And if there's any other information we can get of like behind the scenes, I like to look at the specifics of training and diet. I'm real about that because I've always kind of played sports and try to stay physically active. So I'm always interested in training and diet of various sports programs. And sumo is really unique because they still will follow, and there a lot of heias will still follow centuries old training traditions. And a lot of times there's a good reason why they're still doing it because if it works, it works. But at the same time, with modern technology and nutrition, um, maybe try to find out which heias are being more modern? Are they trying new, different things and seeing how it's working out for them?
Love that. Yeah, I want to add in one more thing. This might be something we edit into an earlier part, but I just wanted to add a little bit more background about you and I that maybe you could pepper in at the beginning parts. But I just wanted to say for a minute, yeah, like obviously Sam said, we've been friends for almost 30 years, which is true and kind of insane. But I think one thing that's important about our backgrounds to give a little bit of context is that it's like we met in basically kindergarten. So we were very similar at the time, but then our lives kind of took very different paths. Sam joined the military and went that path, and I did not, and I basically went the path of becoming a professional videographer. So we kind of have these two very different backgrounds, like unlike I think that's what really makes us interesting as a duo is that like we kind of have different perspectives that even
Mm-hmm.
though we've maintained friends and we're basically like brothers at this point, um, we have these different perspectives on like the world. And like I come from a much more media background, but then like Sam has like a completely different background from me. So that's one thing that I think is a benefit of our
Yeah,
unique
and
growing
Pat's
ups.
in New York City, and I'm outside Washington D.C. Hence why we're separate here. But yeah, no,
Correct.
that's good way to sum it up. Additionally, what we wanted to do, I figure we can do it now. Uh, a little Japanese alcohol review. So I'm
Yes.
we both love beer, whiskey, sake, which Japan does as well. So we really lucked out on that one.
This
So
is
Pat,
true. If
what did you bring to
Yeah,
drink today
well,
while we talk sumo?
anyone who's ever been to Japan knows that they're a big beer culture, obviously. Obviously, there's sake everywhere too, but like I wouldn't say it's like the predominant drink that you normally see going out in general. I would say like the two most important things, or not most prominent things, I should say, are cheap beer and the famous highball. So I decided that for my first drink for our first episode, I've never I like all drinks. I've never been a huge fan of highballs, but since our last trip that we went there, I kind of I've started to appreciate it more. I had more of them on our last trip, and my wife's really into highballs, so I decided that I'm gonna make us a highball. So I'll start really quick. So step number one, glass with ice, and then you're gonna need some seltzer, which I have here from my Soda Stream, not a sponsor yet.
And a sub
Um,
soda stream.
and then you need your whiskey. So here today I got my Suntory Toki. Um, this is just like, it's a really simple whiskey. But we found that it just like mixes really well for a highball. So all I'm gonna do is pour a shot here, small shot because it's still early, and then literally just the rest with. Oh yeah, get the ASMR in there. There we go. With the only thing I didn't bring was some kind of stirring device, but that'll have to wait. So that's it. Simple drink, but a classic salaryman go-to Japanese drink right
Agreed.
there.
So you mentioned sake. That's what I brought. Just a small.
Mm.
It's a Hakutsuru draft sake, Junmai. So you can tell by the
Ooh.
crane logo there. They're the
Oh yeah.
largest sake supplier in
Yeah,
Japan.
so we went to that
Hmm.
brewery on our last trip. It was in Kobe. Kobe's the number one sake supplier in Japan. That city, that area. We went on a tour of a couple different sake breweries, and that was one of them we went to.
So for sakes, I mean, Pat loves sake. I'll say more than I do.
I do.
Not that I dislike it. I like it, but I like the drier, uh, not so sweet. Pat's, pretty much loves all flavor profiles of sake.
Mm.
So here we go. Kampai.
Cheers to the first episode. Kampai. I think the what makes a good highball, like I said, is like a whiskey that's like relatively young. Actually, I think is nice. Like not like too oaky and too like barrely and too aged. It's just like something that's like simple and clean. And this one is just like so good for that. I mean, you can see in the color, like it's not too dark. It's like a little bit lighter, so it hasn't been aged super long. And it's just so perfect for this.
I do like Suntory. Okay, well, now that we've got our drinks and our intros,
Let's get
let's
into it.
talk about sumo. So this intro is a lot longer than it will be. Obviously, it's our first podcast, so that's why taking a little bit longer here. But what our plan and structure is really is find anywhere from two to four subjects to discuss for a few minutes each. We're not planning on making super long episodes. Well, really just hit a few high points that either we want to discuss or that's going on in sumo. Um, and so with the Bonzuke coming up, we figured first we'll talk about the ending of the last
Yeah,
Basho.
a big one.
Um,
Actually, a very big one and a very controversial one at that.
mhm, very fun, and unfortunately because Terano Fuji was injured, but because of his injury, that's what's made the most recent Bashos exciting. Is that really there's a whole number of different folks that could win it. Different fighters. Takakesho won the most recent one in the playoff against
Yeah, it's
Hatsumi
interesting.
Fuji.
It
So is that
That
the
was definitely what I
controversy you
was
were talking
referring to.
about, Pat?
You said it exactly right. Whenever you have a Yokozuna, I feel like as these podcasts progress, we'll be able to talk more about what these actual terms mean. But Yokozuna is your ultimate leader. They're the person who they're the highest. It's the highest position in sumo, and so they're the big boss of the whole thing. And it's always like an interesting dynamic too because they are like once you're Yokozuna, you're always a Yokozuna, basically, and you just maintain that position until you either retire or you expire, I guess. But it sounds blunt, but it's true. So it's always interesting because and then there's always injuries come into play with all this stuff. So you have this guy Tenra Fuji, who's this Yokozuna. He's very powerful, but he also gets injured a lot. So it's exactly like Sam said. When he's not playing, which he hasn't been for the last like last Basho because like of injury, then it opens up this door for all these people to kind of start scrambling to try to win. Like you have people who are brand new who are trying to vie for the title. You have people that are like long standing coming in. I mean, this one we can't really talk about it without talking about Atami Fuji also, obviously, which I know is something you wanted to bring up. But like you have this guy who's brand new. I think he's 19 or 20 years old, and almost won the whole damn thing. So it's just really interesting when you kind of see these moments where it just becomes like chaos.
So what was your take, the
All right.
controversy?
Well, my brief explanation of the controversy. So, without having to complicate it too much, but um, there's a technique in sumo, sidestepping. The official term is
Henka.
henka.
Yeah.
Um,
Sidestepping, backstepping, so that the
yeah,
opponent overshoots and falls forward.
it's exactly. It's basically like, when the two wrestlers get down and begin to fight, they charge at each other, but you have the option to also sidestep, and then the other person basically falls down.
Mm-hmm.
It's a completely 100% legal move. There's nothing wrong with it. It's in the rules. You can do it whenever you want. And if you're a good sumo wrestler, you should kind of know how to counter it. But it is a controversial move because some would consider it to be like not good sumo,
Mm-hmm.
or kind of like a cheap move or whatever. So what the big controversy was at the last one is that he used it in the final match. In the final tiebreaker match, which went into overtime, he did a sidestep.
Takakesho.
Yeah, yeah. So
That's
in
fine.
the final, where the real controversy comes in is Takakeisho sidestepped Atami Fuji in the playoff of the final round. And so, well, yes, technically it was absolutely legal move. It was
Mm-hmm.
absolutely a win. It's completely nothing wrong with it. It sparked this whole controversy because Takakeisho is in line to be promoted to Yokozuna. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
is that what a Yokozuna should be doing? Is that following tradition? Is
Mm-hmm.
that proper way to do it, or is that like controversial? So
So
that, I mean, that was where it
what's your
started.
quick take on it? Do you think, I don't want to say like, oh, it's not honorable sumo, but like, what is your opinion on the controversy here?
For me, it's a tough one because like a part of me is like, okay, it's in the rule book, you can do whatever you want, and you should be ready for it. And I think we've seen in previous bashos, a bunch of people doing a really good job of overcoming one of these maneuvers
Mm-hmm.
and being prepared for it. There's certain repeat offenders. A wrestler named Abi tends to always do it, and over time, people kind of like, okay, you get ready for it, you make defense of it. So there's like a part of me that's like that, but personally, I kind of think that it was it was slightly inappropriate. I mean, like, I, as a person who, like, I mean, just selfishly from a viewer standpoint, like, it's obviously you get up to this final moment. It's a 15-day tournament. You're like watching it for so long, and then the final moment is like over in 4 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
not even 4 seconds, 2 seconds. So it's like, I think from like a you know like a viewer perspective, I don't personally like it, but of course, like I said, I understand that it's a rule, but
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want it to go down that way personally.
I think the only way I'm against it is like is the build up and of the okay, it's a playoff, it's exciting, and it's over in a second. But outside of that, I think I didn't find it too controversial or upsetting for me. The reasons being, um, Takakeshi had already beaten Atami Fuji a couple
It's
days
true.
prior, so he'd already shown that he knows how to defeat him. Um, Atami Fuji false started, kind of showed his young nerves. So I, the wily veteran there saying like, okay, if he's gonna come flying in, I'm gonna teach him a lesson. And it's also they've already fought. Both of them have already fought that day. Uh, you don't want to risk injury or
So you
push it
see it as
more
kind
after
of like a senior teaching moment, perhaps.
yeah, and if this was like a movie or a show, this would be when Atami Fuji, the young protagonist, goes up against the wily, like I said, the wily veteran, and just it's he's the chance to win, and bam, kind of that's it. And so now he's got to go back and train and learn from that, because his nerves. I mean, you could tell how excited he was every time Atami Fuji would go up to fight. He has this whole uh, his own tradition of where he's shuffling the feet before he steps down, and all no, every time he does it, even when there's a restart, he was doing that, and he didn't do that in that playoff. So I think Takakesho could tell Tommy Fuji was nervous to be there. Like, he's a young guy, just made it a lot farther than anyone thought he would have at M17. I mean, he was M17, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah,
So
he's a kid.
you could tell he was nervous, and so Takakesho, I mean, from the making, if he's doing a Yokozuna run, I don't think this should harm his chances because, like I said, Takeshi had already beaten Atami Fuji a few days before.
Yeah, well,
So
I think that the sumo organization agrees with you because I recently saw the news that going into this new Basho in November, he will 100% be considered for
mhm,
Yokozuna pending his performance. So,
yeah.
yeah, I
So
suppose you're
speaking,
right. This is probably why I'm not a body of the sumo organization, among other reasons.
neither one of us are. We're just two American dudes who've been interested in the sport for a few years here. So
Hmm.
speaking of them, do you think Atami Fuji will repeat? Do you think, if not contending for the title, um, at least up there, one of the contenders, I'll say.
I think he's really strong. I mean, we saw this with Hakuoho, I believe. He was a guy who came in same two bashas ago and almost dominated, and then now he's just had surgery. He's out for a while. So I think that's always the kind of risk when you have someone who's like has this explosive rise to power like Atami Fuji has. There's always that fear. I mean, I feel like as we're doing this one, I'm already thinking of so many different specific episodes we can do. Like just one on injury could be it's an entire episode because it's such a huge thing. I mean, it's in every professional sport, right? Obviously, but in this game, in this sport, it's so much more important. I mean, you think about other like individual sports, like I don't know, golf or racing or things like
MMA,
that.
tennis, yeah.
Yeah, injury is important, but it's like it's almost even more important in a sport like this because if you get injured in any way to your leg or your arm, you're pretty much done. You just can't when you're going up head on head with somebody, you have to have 100% of your power. So I think that's like another really interesting factor in a sport. But to answer your question, I think he does have a real chance of doing good. I think he has a really good spirit and a really good attitude. This is something another one we could probably devote a whole other episode to, but all the different personalities and he has kind of what I've seen in the media lately. He's been like so smiley and so happy, and he like during these press conferences, which like traditionally the wrestlers can be very dry
Very
and kind of
stoic.
give like very stoic, very like one word answers. He kind of has given some funny answers. So in this recent thing that he did, it was basically a practice bout where they kind
Hmm.
of go out and they do practice bouts, and then the like press are there and they ask some questions.
Hmm.
The press asked him a question and said, like, what are your biggest fears? And he said, I only have three fears, and fear number one is my stable master, which is classic, and then fear number two is ghosts. And then fear number three is bungee jumping, which is like hilarious, right? I mean, the guy's like almost like 7 feet six. He's like 6'5", 400 pounds,
Yeah.
and like just that he has that like that
And one of
that
those, you got to put yourself in that
attitude.
situation. You got to go bungee jumping.
And
So
it's a weird thing to be afraid of. It doesn't just sneak up on you.
yeah, he's got a good
Um,
personality and yeah, good
so it's
spirit.
like I want to see more of that from him, and
Hmm.
I just like that because I think that also goes into what you were saying earlier about like their pre ringside rituals are such a
Hmm.
part of their personality, and his already was so playful, like you talked about. He just
Hmm.
has this kind, not playful, maybe is not the right word, but he has this kind of like funness to him. So I'm just looking forward to that. So I think
Yeah,
yes, he will do well.
I hope he does because I really like him. I'm not quite buying it. The reason being, I
Mm,
think going back at how he did, he did very well, but he also started out ranked M17, so he was fighting the lower ranked wrestlers. He went, I
right.
believe, 9-1 against those mostly Mayashira, and then his one loss coming to Suragisho. Against M2 and higher, he was 2-4, and that's including two losses to Takakesho. So against five different wrestlers, he was 2-3 with two losses to Takakesho, making that 2-4. So I think he's going to be fighting those the Sakiwake Ozeki guys M1 a lot sooner. He's obviously going to shoot way up the Megashira
Oh
rankings.
yeah,
So he's going to be
yeah.
fighting those high quality guys who are much more veteran and are more likely to know all the little ins and outs that they could pull out. And also, you could say, hey, most of those losses came in the last, what was it, last 5 or 6 days of the Boss show. Sure, but it was also last 5 or 6 days for those other wrestlers. So everyone's feeling fatigue at the end, and also everyone's energetic at the beginning. So I think fighting against the more higher ranking, stronger guys, I still think he'll do well. I don't think he's gonna you know bounce down and get a losing record, but I don't think he'll be in a playoff on day 15 for the win.
I think that's a
Hopefully, I'm
good
wrong because I
point.
really like him.
Yeah, no, but it brings up a good point though, and it's like, I think it's two points is like point number one is that this was his first obvious debut into the top division. So I think a lot of people were just feeling him out and didn't know what he was going to do. And you know that over the last 2 months, people have been studying the tapes and learning about him. And Sumo is so cutthroat in that way that you know that people are going to be exactly like you said, ready to try to counter everything he does. And I think you also brought up a good point too, is that um, you know, in sumo you like you fight at different you fight all the you don't necessarily fight all the top wrestlers in every Basho. So you're not necessarily guaranteed that you're going to fight all the top players. So it is very true. It's like when any wrestler goes into a tournament, they're going to be fighting all sorts of people, and it might be a bunch of lower ranking people first, and then it will change. So it all changes a lot. And then the fact that he's now going to be ranked a lot higher, you're exactly right. He'll be up against like much higher competition.
Quick correction: he was Mega Share 15 in this last Basho, and this technically it wasn't his actual Mega Share debut. That was last November, but he went 4 and
Right.
11 as Mega Share 15. So he came up and then immediately went back down to Jirio. So just
Okay.
quick correction there. All right. Another thing I wanted to talk about, just he's one of my favorite wrestlers. Hoshoyu made Ozeki in July. So, but then he barely got the Kachikoshi on the last day. Kachikoshi meaning he finished with a winning record of 8-7. Uh,
Right.
it looked like he may not have gotten it, but the last few days he really got it together and ended up with the winning or with a winning record. Excuse me. Now, one of the things I
Yeah.
saw on some of the forums, I go on the sumo subreddit quite a bit. Someone said, "Oh well, most people don't do well after they make Ozeki because there is much more publicity involved. They do many more public affairs events. They're do yeah, a lot more events. There's a lot more involved. There's a lot more public facing work to be done once you make Ozeki. And I always joked that, oh, you get the Ozeki fish. You may have seen those pictures of, the Ozeki, signifying you're an Ozeki now. It's a type of fish. I have to go look it up and I'll correct myself later. But I was joking. He was eating too much of the Ozeki fish. But what I wanted to look was, hey, is this true? Or is just, this just urban myth or just something say? So I went back and I looked at a number of last 7 names I have here who made Ozeki. So Takayasu made Ozeki after going 11-4 at the July 2017 Basho. Then he went 1-2-12 in September. So got next Basho went injured, and then he's out.
That was a wrap.
One of your favorites, Toshinoshin, made
Mm,
Ozeki after going 13-2 at the May 2018 Basho. Then he went 5-2-8 in the following Basho. So
wow.
again, starting strong, 5-2 winning record, and then out with injury. Asano Yama, 11-4 in March 2020. But here's interesting. That was so COVID was just starting up then, March of 2020.
Right.
There was no May
Right.
Basho. July of 2020, he goes 12-3. So
Right.
does that mean there's either more recovery time or he doesn't have to deal with
Yeah.
any of the publicity,
None of it.
events that Ozeki normally do? And
Yeah.
then he only had one after that. He only had one tournament with a losing record. That was a withdrawal, November 22. Then he was demoted due to breaking uh, COVID protocols. Um,
That'll happen.
I spoke a little out of a timeline there, but anyway, he May 2020 broke COVID protocol, suspended for 6 tournaments. That's how fiercely Japan was taking COVID at the time. So he started all the way back down in Sandan-May, worked his way back up through from Makashi to Dejuryo. And so his only losing record since making Ozeki in March of 2020 was last year in November.
Right.
Shodai, the next one, made Ozeki September 2020, went 13-2. Then he went 3-2-10 in November of 2020. He can't bounce back, went 11-4, but Mitakiumi, March of 22, went 11-4. Then he went 6-9. Takakeisho, winner, most recent, May 2019, he went 10-5. So he was promoted to Ozeki. Then May 2019, he went 3-4-8. Interesting, he withdrew on the 5th day due to injury. Then he returned on day 8 for one more fight, then withdrew again. This makes him the first Ozeki since 15-day tournaments began in 1949 to withdraw from a tournament twice. So a
Whoa,
little
weird.
little little bar trivia fact. I don't know how many
That's
sumo
a
bars
little
you know
nugget.
of, but if you find any, let me know. Okay,
There might be one.
next Kirishima, promoted May 2023, and then in July went 6-7-2. So of those seven Ozeki, only Asanoyama had a winning record after making Ozeki. So
And he's got and it's under different circumstances.
yeah, so really it's Hoshoyu changing things up a bit. Now I was like, hey, what about Yokozuna? How did they do after they made Ozeki? Because these guys are a
Mm,
different breed. So going back, Hakuho, I mean, he's the GOAT though. So he makes 13-2 in March '06, and then he turns around, goes 14-1, and wins a tournament in May of 2006. But I mean, he's the GOAT. So you
yeah,
can't really
right.
compare anyone else to him. Haruma Fuji went 13-2 November 2008. He was promoted then. Then he went 8-7 the next Basho. So just like Hoshoyu. Kakuryu went 13-2 in March of 2012, then 8-7 in May. So again, uh, Kasino Sato went 10-5 in November 2011. Then he went 11-4 in January 2012, so he improved as well. And then Teruno Fuji, who's the only current active Yokozuna, went 12-3 in May 2015, won the tournament, promoted to Ozeki. Then he won 11-4 in his first Ozeki match. So all of those, the five most recent Yokozuna, all had a winning record after they made Ozeki. So according to my
Mm.
statistics, according to my math, and this is coming from history major, Hoshoyu is going to be Yokozuna.
Wow. Okay, you heard it here first.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
I just thought that was
it's
interesting to
really
look at.
no, it is really interesting when you hear the numbers like that because yeah, I mean, like for those who don't know, like when you like exactly like Sam said, and it's I think it's actually it's this is something that we can talk about in another podcast, but when you get promoted, I mean, you got to think about it, right? Like not only are is a couple things. A, you have a giant target put on your back immediately, so everybody else in the game is going to be studying you and wanting to take you down. So like you have a new level of visibility that you didn't have in the last tournament. That's like already a huge thing. And then on top of that, yeah, like if you look up any of the material out there, like these guys are going on press tours, they're going around, they're doing things, they're talking to people. So of course they still have time for tons of time for training, but it's not the same because you all of a sudden had this other thing you have to deal. It's kind of the
Mhm.
classic story of like fame getting, letting it get to you, and you
Fame
don't really
sumo
have a
style.
choice. Yeah, and you don't really have much of a choice because you have to like they have to kind of do these
Hmm.
things and go out and have these give these speeches and do this stuff. So like anyone is going to then of course have their mind somewhere else. So I think
Yeah.
it's really hard to kind of like
Hmm.
keep that going.
So what I'm getting at is that what I'm hoping is that Hoshoyu bounces back.
Yeah, it's interesting. He was so strong when he won his tournament, and he just like every now and then, like in the last couple of years that I've been watching, you see a wrestler that you can just see them in their zone, and you can just like tell, and they just
Mhm.
look like unbeatable. It's like the way that they're walking, the way that they're looking, the way that they're fighting, and you're just like nothing can stop this guy. And he was there, when
Mhm.
he won, and that was in
July.
July. When he won in July, it was just like he was just on a man on a mission, and
Mhm.
then he comes back in and all of a sudden it's just like he kind of just started having this losing streak, and to me it's just like it's just it can be really hard to make that to bring that kind of intensity to every single thing, especially since the boss shows are every other month or every 2 months I should say. Um, it's just like can be really difficult to bring that intensity every single time and have to come back and repeat it physically and mentally, I think.
Yeah, so we'll see. I mean,
We
I've
shall
liked
see.
him. Like you were saying, he's got a certain look, and you'll see when he gets in, he's got this glare, and it looks
Mm,
like a really intense stare down. I thought, like, man, this
he
guy,
does.
he's in the zone. He's an athlete. But again, then I read something, and he was saying that he doesn't have the best eyesight, so he's really squinting around a lot. And I was like,
Mm.
well, that's one way to make a disability intimidating.
He has a very intimidating presence.
Okay. A couple other, the only other real item I want to talk to was Jurio, and just talk about Juryo winner and then the Makushita winner. So Juryo Ichiyamamoto won at 13-2. He'll make his return to Maegashira. He went 4-9-2 back in July when he was there, or in July he went 4-9-2. Excuse me. He was in Maegashira briefly in 2021, and then in 22 through 23, mostly between M8 and M17. But then it was almost a playoff injury on the last day, but Onosato lost to Roga. But Onosato is someone else I wanted to mention. Another kind of one of these young bloods coming up.
Mm,
He's 23 years old, out of Subata, Ishikawa Prefecture, in the
hmm.
Nishinoseki stable. He went 6-1 in his Makushita debut in May, and then 4-3 in July, then 12-3 in September, losing or he lost to Ruga, so he didn't go to the playoff against Ichiyamamoto. He's 23, and like I said, because he's so young, he's also got the short hair, so he doesn't have the top knot like the other
Right.
veteran wrestlers. So that's always fun to see someone who's so young. They haven't grown their hair out long enough to tie it up on top. Um, the name Onosato comes from Onosato Mansuke, who was an Ozeki active during the Taisho era of Japan, which I'm sure you know all about, Pat. I'll to prevent you from going on for a while. It was basically when Japan became much more liberalized. There was a weak emperor, and so the imperial government, the Diet, uh, became a lot more powerful. So it was a period of strong liberalization in Japan. Anyway, his
Hmm.
current coach, Onosato's. Oh, and that was from that Ozeki. Onosato Mansuke wrestled from 1912 to 1926. So reaching
Okay,
back
got it.
into the history books for that one. His coach is a retired Yokozuna, uh, the 72nd Yokozuna, Kiseno Sato. So he's got a great coach, young, strong guy, been doing really well. So hopefully, you know, you could see him doing things in the next one.
That's cool.
And
I love seeing the young guys come.
then little fun fact here for Makushita, Pat. Do you know what the maximum number of wrestlers in Makushita is, and why it's considered the hardest division to get out of?
So they're like, first off, I know. So you're saying that they have like a cap on the number of wrestlers
Mm-hmm.
that can be in this division.
Yeah,
I'm gonna guess 50.
120.
Oh my god, well, I was way
Mm-hmm.
off. So that's why it would be the hardest to get out of, I
Well,
assume,
not
because
only because it's
it's a large pool.
120, but how many bouts do Makushita guys fight? How many fights do they have during a Basho?
Oof, I'm guessing a lot. No?
No,
Oh, how many?
7.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, so 120 wrestlers, 7 spots fighting for promotion. So that's kind of why up
God.
to 127 fights. So that's kind of why it's considered the hardest to get out of
Uh,
because there's so many, and you could lose a couple fights, and there would be however many ahead of you who either gone 6-1, bunch more going. Like there was almost a 12-person playoff. I want to say at the most recent Basho for Makushita because they were all 6-1. It didn't happen, so we were denied a 12
a
person,
tr- that would have been something.
a 12, yeah, a 12 player or 12 not player 12 person um, playoff. But that's the reason why. Who won Makushita was Hitoshi. He's a 26-year-old out of Oitakaze, and he's been in Makushita since January of 2023, mostly going 3-4, 4-3. So again, you could have a winning record, but you're not going to be moving up unless you're really dominating in
Mm.
Makushita. Okay, I think we've gone longer than we intended to. Next time we talk will probably be a Basho review, especially with the Banzuke coming out here in the next couple of days.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Yeah, no, I mean, I think
Any closing points?
that's great. Well, closing points. I mean, for like, just to kind of bring it back together, it's like for us, like, Sam's like my brother. We've done a lot of adventures together, and we've really come together over this sport.
Mm-hmm.
It's been something we've really enjoyed following, and I think it's like there is coverage on it in America. There's obviously a couple other podcasts. There's some other, there's a couple YouTube channels. There is some coverage on it, but there really isn't a ton of coverage on it. And I think, in the last tournament that we went to in person, we were kind of surrounded by a couple different tourists, and it was just interesting kind of being there and kind of seeing like, oh, I used to be like that too. I used to be
Hmm.
someone who just like wanted, didn't know what this was and was only doing this because I thought it was cool. And I think it's like, it's cool, the goal of here is to kind of bring more awareness to the sport from like an English speaking side, and to kind of like give a little bit more insight into the sport itself. So
Yeah.
that's the
So
plan.
if you took the time to listen to get this far and listen to our first episode, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. We hope to get out a couple episodes a month during a Basho. Hopefully, try to get out more. But we're both working full-time jobs, so we will do
Right.
this when we can. But I say when we can, but we still want to make this priority because it's a sport we love and we enjoy just
Hmm.
joking around with each other. This is something that we joke around with quite a bit. So thank you very much. That's all I have.
In the next episode, we will reveal what Sam's shirt means. That's all
Maybe.
for now.